Alright, like, click, and subscribe, do all that. You already know what time it is. It's Netflix time. This movie's called The Hummingbird Project. After discovering a shortcut that gives them a technological advantage, two cousins look to earn their biggest score by outracing a massive corporation. So it's a Canadian movie drama that deals with the stock market. It came out in 2018 and it's an hour and 50 minutes long. And this one's definitely going to be a spoiler alert, so letting you know heads up right now. So let's get into it. So we start out with Vincent talking to this guy on the bench about a pipeline. He wants to build a pipeline from Kansas all the way to the New York Stock Exchange, which is located in New Jersey. He tries to convince this guy that's running a company that he can have it running in 16 milliseconds. Now, what does all that mean? That means if Vincent and his cousin Antoine can make this happen, then he'll make millions of dollars for pretty much everybody involved. And this is their guy, Michael. He does engineering, plumbing, construction, all that. He also helps out with the NDAs, non-disclosure agreements. And digging through these pipelines, they're going to have to get a lot of those to even make this possible. To do this, they have to use the nanocodes from their boss. Eva Torres, played by Salma Hayek. Yes. Still looking marvelous, takes me back on Desperado days and From Dusk Till Dawn. She's not as ruthless as she was in the movie Savages, but damn near close. So this job is basically going to take about a year, and using discretion would probably be an understatement. And trust me, this project is not legal by any stretch of the imagination. So Antoine goes home and he's drilling a hole in his cabinet. And he puts his computer in a dial-up modem in there, for reasons I'll try to explain later on. So they officially started this project at the end of 2011. And because of the fact they have to run the cable absolutely straight, they have to get a lot of NDA agreements for people that own property. Basically reassuring people that own property that it won't affect their land in any type of way whatsoever. Letting them know that they only use a small piece of land and they bury the cables like anywhere between 6 to 100 feet down the ground. So far, so good. A week later, Eve is talking to some investors. While this is going on, Vinny and Antoine, both cousins, unannounced to Eve is that they're filling out their resignations. She catches up to him like, what the fuck is this? Vinny and Eve get into a war of words and she's trying to get Antoine back. But Antoine obviously goes with his cousin. Then they start the plan. June 2012, they start from Kansas to Missouri, that's about 22 miles. From West Virginia to Pittsburgh, that's about 27.5 miles. The ending point being two parts of New Jersey, that's 11.7 miles. Now, of course, in the movie, they didn't show us every key point of where they were digging. Antoine's explaining to the investors where to dig at, because, they're giving them a lot of money to do this. They're pretty much putting their company at risk. No risk, no reward, I guess. So now they're on their way to Pennsylvania, but Antoine's absolutely nervous about flying, and the moment he hears something about turbulence, he spazzes out, they kick him off the plane, so it's back to driving, which obviously cost them some time. But they were able to get the crews together and make it happen. What they don't know is somebody's been following them. Now, Eve Torres had this random guy following them to probably check and see what they're doing. Now, my question is, it's been over a year at this point. How long has this guy been stalking them? Well, while they're in the car driving, they start asking Michael questions about work. And he tells them this hilarious story. Let's just call it the positive shit scene. They get to the hotels and get settled in. Antoine gets straight to work. The stalker gets himself a room there. They're all gathered around eating dinner. And Vincent's stomach starts hurting. He keeps saying that he ate some bad fish or something like that. I'll tell you why that's important in a minute. So they're discussing their plans, but unbeknownst to them, the stalker is looking through another window and actually sees them and is seeing the plans, who is obviously giving this information right back to Eve Torres. So now she's figured out they've been making their own pipeline, and I think she's figured out that they're using her codes as well. Or so we all thought anyway. So now next day is back to business. So they're talking to this one contractor about this spot that they can't dig in, is near the mountains. They can't get the licensing to do that, so they're trying to find ways to get around it. She's telling them a drill that can possibly do that would cost them like $80,000 a day. It's crazy. And that's not even using it. That's just to even bring it over. Some big money involved in this shit. So at night he can't sleep, his stomach is hurting, he's trying to take Pepto-Bismol and all this stuff. Again, I'll explain why his stomach is hurting in a minute. Antoine's in his room still trying to crack the nanosecond code, and he needs to crack this code, otherwise there will be no purpose to what they're doing. Because every other company is running at 17 milliseconds, they're trying to get it to 16. Vincent finally goes to the doctor to get a checkup, and they say the reason his stomach is hurting like that because he has some type of stomach cancer. She tells him he can live through it if he gets the proper treatment, but he would have to be in the hospital most of the time. But if he let it go untreated, he probably would only last maybe 6 months to a year left. But he's thinking to himself, he can't sit in the hospital. He has too many people depending on him trying to get this money, so he's basically just going to risk his life to do this. And they've been working on this pipeline for like a year and a half at this point. Shit's crazy. He goes to take a smoke break, obviously not making the situation any better. Gets his contractors their money, and now it's back to business. Meanwhile, Antoine gets a call from his wife. She's trying to make sure he's okay. He's like, yeah, I'm still working, doing what I need to do. But she's generally concerned about what he's doing. Then he gets on the phone and talks to his daughter. Like, she's pretty smart. She definitely gets her smarts from her dad. Meanwhile, they're at the riverbank. They talk to this guy to see which rivers they could actually go through to process this cable line. Meanwhile, Antoine's chilling in a bathtub. He feels water. He turns around, and there's Eve Torres in his hotel suite. Like, oh shit. She tells this story about somebody else committing fraud and getting like 8 years in prison for it, basically sending them threats and ultimatums. Meanwhile, Vincent and his boys, they out there cutting down trees, getting the process done, but he's contemplating about, the news that he got from the doctor, obviously. Antoine's pacing back and forth in his hotel like, is this bitch gonna send me to jail? Like, what the fuck is going on? Vincent and them are driving back and then he notices a helicopter. And yes, it's Eve Torres' helicopter. So obviously the first person he goes to is Antoine. Antoine reassures him he's good, but he's like, nah, you gotta get out, I gotta do some work, man. Vincent goes back to check on everybody, making sure Eve didn't say anything to him or try to bargain with him or anything like that. As they're flying, Eve kind of notices the tower that they're trying to attach the cable to, or once again, so she thinks. Vincent checks on the other dudes to find out that they quit because Eve Torres has probably offered them double their money or whatever like that. So he tells Mike to make sure everybody else sticks around, and the people that are sticking around, he'll pay them double if he has to. Antoine's doing some work at the bar. Then his waiter keeps bothering him, asking him what is he doing. So before he tells her, he makes her write an NDA agreement, non-disclosure. Let's just say they start talking about lemon farms and he actually gets some more insight into this conversation. Back at the office, this guy comes up with an amazing thesis for Eve, and she's willing to pay him double or triple of what he's making now if he can get this stuff working. Basically, he thinks this guy can make their already pipeline 13 milliseconds. Meanwhile, Vince is setting up with the technician so he can actually go to the site where they're about to start digging. He wanted to personally oversee this one. And he starts telling her the story about his dad. She gives him some insight. They get to the site and start digging, and she tells him, I hope you make it back. Because he has to take the boat back up the river, but obviously that's a double meaning for him. Which he's obviously contemplating about his stomach cancer. He heads back on a plane to get to Antoine, and his stomach starts hurting again. Antoine's still trying to figure out the nanosecond thing. He finally gets to Antoine and gets him out the room so he can get some fresh air. They're driving to get a flat tire. They start talking dreams about owning land and being out in the quiet country, watching their kids grow up and stuff like that. They finally get their tire fixed and head out to the spot. Antoine's watching them drill, but you can notice he can tell there's something wrong. They end up drilling in through a water vein, which damages the drill. Vince is pretty much pissed off because it's going to cost more money that he doesn't have. So he's got to go back up there asking for more money because they're a little concerned because the job might not get done within a month like they're trying to get it done at. He's asking a lot of questions and looking for trust because once again, it's pretty much his company on the line. But they talk it out and he reassures them and sends him about $15 million in his account. He goes to a massage parlor, gets a massage. He starts crying when he's getting the massage. I mean, the guy's been stressed out. I mean, he needs it. Plus the fact that he's got stomach cancer and it's crazy. He's got all this people's money and time and lives invested in this, you know what I'm saying? So it's all the chain. Years invested in it, so He misses a call from Mike, so it's urgent, so he's about to get up out of there and figure out what's going on. Antoine once again talking to his wife, feeling concerned, and he feels like he's being watched. So after that, he starts shutting down all the blinds. So Vincent goes to this property and he hits a roadblock. He talks to this Amish guy that owns the land. He gives him a sales pitch, but he's not budging. He's willing to offer them $230,000 for the damages, and they still not budging. Because they don't believe in that way of life. They don't need the money like that because they don't live lavishly. So you can tell he's pretty pissed off at this point. He's trying to find some common ground with him. So Antoine finally figures out the nanosecond problem by finding a way to reduce the cost from generators. So he goes in the hallway and starts celebrating. But look who's coming down the hallway, motherfucking FBI. They ask if he's Antoine. He takes off running. They chase him by the tennis court. Obviously he gets caught. They're arresting him for stock market fraud. Michael starts digging on the Amish's man land anyway, saying that anybody could dig through there if it's going under 100 feet above the ground. Basically stating as long as it's 100 feet, it's not technically his land, it's everybody's land around him. So somewhere they found some type of legal loophole. Meanwhile, Antoine's in jail asking for his lawyer. Vince is in the bathroom pissing blood. Obviously that's not good. And just gets the news that Antoine's in jail. He lets his team know to get lawyers down there ASAP as soon as possible. Then Mike tells him get in the car because he got another problem. So Eve left their calling card and she knows what they're up to. Basically telling them that she's going to stop their pipeline and start hers up through them. Vincent forces Michael to drive to the tower even though there's no real main roads to get to it. Yeah. Eve starts the transaction, now they making money. So at this point, they think they got the pipeline. Vincent's investors are getting worried because they're hearing about the pulls from the bell towers. Vince and Michael get stuck driving up there. Vincent plans on walking up there by himself with a chainsaw to cut the shit down, which is pretty asinine as Michael's trying to explain to him. Then Vincent just collapses out of nowhere. Meanwhile, Antoine's wife is visiting Antoine in jail. He says he'll be out soon. Vincent's strapped to the gurney. He's going to a hospital, but he still has to make one final call for a transaction. Antoine makes a phone call, but he calls his house. Remember when he stuck the modem and the computer in that file cabinet earlier? Well, anyway, he does that, and it actually sets the company he used to work for 20 milliseconds slower than it used to be, causing Eve to lose a ridiculous amount of money. So Vincent had a fallback plan just in case he couldn't get the pipes thing to work for the years that he put a focus onto it. So she goes to visit Antoine in jail. Antoine says, drop the charges and leave Vince alone, and I'll get you running up and back to normal. She agrees because she's not trying to lose her company. Meanwhile, in the hospital, Vince sees his employer, realizing that he pretty much lost everything. But he kind of takes sympathy on him due to the fact that he has cancer. But Vincent tells him he really did try everything he could to do this. So, and he knows. Vincent finally back home, he goes on Skype with Michael, and he finally tells him that he was able to drop it to 15.73 milliseconds. They did it for the satisfaction at that point because they didn't really make any money after that because they didn't have no company to reverse on. Antoine joins Vincent and he's like, we gotta make a stop real quick. They get in the car and they head down to the Amish guy's spot. And he sees they need some help lifting some food supplies. He goes over to help, but really he came there just to tell them that they took the plumbing out of their land. The Amish man obviously sees that he's sick and he tells him to stay in the barn until he gets the rains lets up. And then Antoine and Vincent basically just sit back and reflect on everything. Wow, well, that was a mouthful. I advise you to check out the Hummingbird Project on Netflix. It came out in like 2018. Slick DZ out the easy, like, click, and subscribe, do all that. You already know what it is. Mr. Ow, big, 'cause you got that slogan.